Hello, and welcome to another episode of Conservative Corner. I am your host, Shannon Carey, and today I have with me two state representative candidates, Sherri Reinfort and Henry Gaisson III. Welcome to Conservative Corner. So I do have to have full disclosure here. I know you guys out of this little interview, and I have to say I couldn't be more thrilled that the both of you are decided to run for state rep. You're both really kind and compassionate people. And I feel like there's the quality that you guys display the most that I've noticed is you have the old adage of it's okay to agree to disagree. And there's like a civility when I've had conversations with you guys that maybe if we don't agree on something, you're just very civil about it. It's like, oh, they just have a different position. It's okay. And I feel like that's really lost in government. So it was a really big breath of fresh air. When I saw you guys running, I was like, oh, yay, I'm so excited.
Thank you.
But for our viewers that don't know you, Sherri, why don't you tell us first a little bit about yourself?
Well, I guess the first thing that I want people to know is that I'm not a politician, although by virtue that I'm sitting in this chair, I am now.
Yeah.
But more than anything, I'm a wife. I'm a mother of 5 children. I have 16 grandchildren. I have 2 golden retrievers, and I live on a lake. And I am just your everyday person who has discovered that I have a voice and that I can use that voice. And I can, more importantly, be the voice for other people who can't or won't speak up. And so our town, in my opinion, is very divided. Our state is divided. Our country is divided. And I want to be able to use that voice to bring some unity and ensure that my grandchildren have a future. Yeah. There's a saying that I love. It's from a movie. And high five if you know the answer to the movie. But there's a line in the movie that says you can sit and do nothing or you can get up and do something. And so I'm choosing to get up and do something.
Awesome. I'm so happy you're choosing to do something. And how about you, Henry?
I can't guess the movie, by the way.
That's okay. It's all good. How about you, Henry? What can you share with us?
So I grew up in a military family, moving around the United States. So I had a lot of exposure to a lot of different parts of the country very young. And then I joined the Army and did a 24-year career, including tours in hostile environments, and moved around some with that. And I retired in 2020, right in the height of COVID. Retired to Goffstown. That was an intentional move. And I really just decided that I still had some service to the country left in me, that my oath to support and defend the Constitution hadn't ended. And I decided that it was time to run to make sure that our liberties continue to be protected and try to continue to serve the United States in the best way that I can.
Wow. Well, thank you for your service. I love both those answers. Those are great people to have involved. So, speaking of the issues, why don't we get down to the issues? What do you see are the key issues for our state in this election? Sherri?
Okay, so I'm just going to make it super simple. One of the biggest issues is that we are lacking common sense. There are so many issues, it's hard to really whittle it down, but they're all intertwined together. Yep. And what seems to be the dividing factor is common sense. We need to start believing what we see. We need to start believing what we hear, what we read, not what people tell us to see and tell us to read and tell us to hear. We need to be able to make our own decisions and protect our freedoms, protect our constitutional rights, protect our children, protect our way of life, and just bring things back, like you said, the way they used to be. Agree to disagree, but put things in motion to get back on track to the way life used to be.
And it kind of seems like because there's this side and that side, and because there's no common sense, it's like there's a stalemate on everything. So as just a resident, like just an everyday citizen of New Hampshire, sometimes it feels like, are we moving in any direction? Like we're just stagnant.
Right.
We're not getting anything done.
Right.
I think.
So like Henry, I actually grew up in the military too. My father was in the Air Force, so I traveled all over the place. And I came here to New Hampshire 23 years ago from California. So I've seen a lot. I go back to California. So there's a stark contrast to where we are, where we have been. But the road that we're heading into is sadly, there is a big comparison. And so the time, I feel, is now that we're able to do something to, protect our freedoms.
Yeah. How about you, Henry? What do you see as the biggest issue?
So I agree with everything that you just said, and one of the things that I like to keep an eye on is I like to say follow the money trail, because no policy that's passed has been passed on accident or without the direct profit of somebody, whether it was a contractor, a family member of a government official. You follow the money trail and you can find a lot of truths.
Yeah.
And I also don't think that the government expressly does anything better than the private sector with less waste, fraud, and abuse, as the case were. So, part of protecting our civil liberties and protecting our freedoms is keeping higher level hands out of the money pot, because every time somebody reaches into that money pot, they have to pay their staff, their contractors, etc. So, I don't have the math in front of me, but for every tax dollar that goes to the federal, you don't get that gain on return. Same with the state, same even with the town. So the more we can keep the freedoms local to the citizen and keep the money local to the community, the better off we should be, as long as there's, again, cooperative management of those utilizations of those funds.
That's an interesting way to look at it, to follow the money. I don't know that I ever thought of it that way.
Yeah.
That's actually really interesting. Well, one of my kind of passionate topics or issues would be school choice, because I have a 16 and a 13-year-old. So I know the final House session a couple weeks ago, the Republicans lost the vote to expand the EFA program, the Education Freedom Accounts, which was all about eligibility, and it ended up affecting thousands of Granite State families from accessing that education model. It was definitely a sad one for my family as we utilized the school choice model. My son's in a charter school. So I'm wondering, where as candidates, where you both stand on the school choice and EFA program. Do you see it the way some say is it steals from like standard public education, or that the only people who are using it are sending their kids to private school? So what are your thoughts on the EFA program and school choice as a whole? Because that's traditional homeschool, charter, the EFA homeschoolers. Henry?
So, again, I believe in the family is the root, the best root government that there is. So I think that school choice should ultimately be with the family. Now, the schools are allocated funding per student. If the schools are trying to be competitors in education, they need to offer a better product. And that means that if the public school is the best school option near you, then you would want to go to that. And if it's a private school, then you would want to go to that. And if neither are good options, then you should have the ability to take your taxpayer funding and go to a school. I personally don't have children and never have. I contribute because educating the next generation is important for all Americans and all Granite Staters.
Well said.
But if I did have children, I would want the flexibility to be able to educate them where and how I saw fit. And I would also want full transparency on that school's curriculum.
I agree 100%. How about you, Sherri?
Okay, this is where Mama Bear comes in. Because I do have 5 kids. I do have 16 grandchildren. I have 3 that are actually in the Goffstown school districts. And so this is personal for us. For years, though, our kids were in New Boston and, in other districts. But having grown up in the military, we moved all the time. And so I literally was in a different school every single year. So I did not land in a school until I got to high school, and then it was 3 years in the same school. So I'm a big proponent for public schools, for public education, because that's what I had.
Right.
And that's what my children, our 5 kids, went to public school. There's nothing wrong with public school. The curriculum has changed. We need to, common sense, put the kids first. Right? The kids need to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, history. They need to, in my opinion, go back to, outside activities, learning what happened to welding and workshop and, home ec and all of these life skills that they're actually able to take in our public education that seems to be slipping and we're replacing. And so there's big argument for the EFAs for private schools. And I think that choice, just like Henry says, should be with the parents. That, it appears as though government is trying to take control away from our parents.
Yeah.
We need to put that control back in our parents. And because it's about the kids, it's not about the funding for this, the funding for that. It's about the kids and where are the kids going to get the best education, because they're our future.
Oh, yeah.
They are our future. And if we're not educating them so that they can step into that future and, help our country grow, then we're doing them a disservice. So wherever they can get that, whether it is homeschooling and utilizing EFAs, homeschooling kids are no longer what they used to be portrayed as,
Oh, no.
right? Not
No.
at all, right? I know several people that homeschool, and these children have an opportunity to learn in ways that are not taught in the public school, right? There's the private schools, and some kids are going to private schools because they're excelling in sports,
Yeah.
right? And there are children that excel in public schools. So I think going back to the finances, we need to take a look at where are those monies being spent and stop the argument that it's the state's fault that public schools are not adequate. We just read a study came out. We used to be number 4.
Yeah, we're not
In our
anymore.
public schools, we're not anymore. We're 19, right?
And I saw people celebrating that online, and I was
Right.
like, I moved here, we were number 4.
Right.
Like, we're no longer even in the top 10.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
My kids are looking at, when they've looked at moving, they obviously, and anybody, we have friends that are real estate agents, and what's one of the first things that you look at? The schools, right?
If you have kids, yeah.
Exactly. And New Boston feeds into Goffstown, and so that's great. New Boston has their school. They feed into Goffstown. At that time, we're number 4, yay. But now we've dropped down to 19. So what is that saying? So to the original question, do I support EFAs, school choice, public schools, all of that? Absolutely. I think the parent should do what's best for the child because that's what it's about.
And back to your point, Henry, where you were talking about follow the money.
I was just going to ask.
I
nugget.
feel like, and I don't want to just blame Goffstown, because this isn't just, in my
gosh, no.
opinion, this is not just a Goffstown
gosh, no.
issue. It's a
No, no, no.
statewide issue.
Right.
All these districts have been, we need more money. They throw more money. They throw more money. Yet test scores are going, like proficiency and test scores are going down. Like, I love my kids, but I look at maybe what I knew at 16 and what my daughter knows at 16, just when it comes to everyday life. And like, these kids are not prepared. They're not prepared at all. So we're throwing more money at the problem, but it's not getting any better. And what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And that's what I feel like we're doing with education funding for public schools, is we're not getting anywhere.
Right.
And I know my husband, who is on the budget committee, he's been, he's one of the, he's just so, he wants to know everything. He like every nook and cranny, and just like looking at some of what admins are paid throughout the state. Some of those administrators are making double what our teachers are making.
Right.
And I'm like, wait a minute, but they're the ones educating our kids.
I saw that, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I think one of the things that should be on the forefront of people's minds is, I'm on the board for the Goffstown Main Street program,
Yep.
and I just attended the scholarship night. I didn't even know Goffstown did a scholarship night.
Yeah.
Yay, Goffstown. Anyway, so I read, we had 72 applicants for our scholarship that we were giving, and the common denominator between the kids that were high and picked, the common denominator is that they excelled in school, that they were involved in an activity. So whether that is a sport, whether it, or just
Music,
any kind
something,
of club,
extracurricular.
something extracurricular, and they did volunteerism within their community. Those 3 things. And that's public school, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, we've got certain programs that are catering to a percentage that's not the greater of our kids in our schools. And that if we took that and catered to all of them and promoted, get involved in activities. There's some kids that say, oh, I can't do sports because I'm not athletic. Well, you know what? I wasn't athletic either. And like you, I was a cheerleader instead.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
That's very athletic, actually.
Well, I know. But whether it's choir, whether it's theater, whether it's whatever, right? So the applicants that scored the highest in being looked at were involved. And I think that's what needs to be promoted also. And any of these funding curriculums that are in our public schools right now that don't cater to the masses can be put into like a club. Or,
why
an
not?
after school, an evening program, something like that. Because that will allow the children then to explore other avenues within their education.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you touched on was how robust the non-direct educator role is in the public school system.
Yeah.
You know, the administrative
admins.
staff. It's become not only robust, but like you said, much higher paid. I do agree that the people that directly educate our children are underpaid for their roles at
Oh,
times.
100%.
But where is that money allocated, and why are there more robust, higher paid staff positions being put in that are not direct education roles that the people are expected to fund? And those are two questions that I can't sit here and answer. I've had discussions with members of our school board and our budget committee, and my understanding is that there's concern that there's another $100,000+ authorization for another admin role that could be pressed on the town.
Yeah.
And if that becomes the truth, that's more money out of pockets, and that's not providing a better education product.
No. And I
Yeah.
hear, like, when I watch the school board meetings, it's like, well, we were able to, because this whatever ended, we were able to take those funds and pay somebody to add to the Maple Avenue school because they're so short-staffed. It's like, okay, but then you're going to add $100,000+ admin position when maybe that could hire 2 paras who could be helping. So I look at some of those positions that they're trying to add administratively, like it's DEI, it's those things that I'm like, wait a minute. If our reading proficiency is down here, I'm not saying we don't need to teach children how to be kind to one another. I'm not saying we don't need to teach children how to not see color or gender. I'm not saying that at all, but shouldn't we be focusing on making sure our kids can read, that they can do addition and subtraction and multiplication, and that they know our country's history? I'd rather focus on that than paying somebody over $100,000. Like, I just don't understand sometimes. I scratch my head and I'm going,
Well, and you know what, being a teacher is hard, and I praise the ground they walk on.
Yeah.
Because you have to be everything to these kids.
Yeah.
But I think the direction of what their everything is what's at issue.
yeah. Well, speaking of educational funding, in Goffstown alone, I constantly hear from our school board that the state does not do their fair share. And for our viewers that do not know, in the state of New Hampshire, we have a SWEPT tax, which is the statewide education property tax, which basically means in your property tax bill, when you see SWEPT, that's tax dollars for education that goes to the state. And then the state has one giant pot and they divvy it back up to the districts. So my mindset is, once the money goes to the state can then stick their nose in our business. That's how I view it. That's where those mandates come from. And ultimately, I've always felt like Goffstown administrators, Goffstown teachers, they know Goffstown residents. They know Goffstown students. The State House doesn't. So I would much rather keep our money here and let the people who know our kids decide how that should be spent. But what say you when it comes to that? I know there's the whole statewide adequacy funding that's been a big hot button issue for people. Do you think the state is funding enough? Do you think they should do more, less?
So I think I had already touched on that. Every time money goes higher up the food chain, some of it gets eaten before it comes back down.
100%.
And it comes back down with conditions, as you said. So, going back in history, you look at the No Child Left Behind Act, which, while it had great intention,
Yes.
was implemented in a very poor way. But it was mandated because of federal tax dollars coming back to the education system. The state can do the same thing, but every time that money changes hands, some comes off the top to pay the staff that's handling it, and it's up to somebody else to discuss disbursement. If it was up to me, the gross majority of our education money would always stay local, and we wouldn't have to pay the state staff to handle it and the federal staff to handle it, and then have it trickle back down as they see fit to redistribute it.
Yeah.
Now, I understand again that we have a responsibility. Some townships are wealthier than others, some
Yes.
families are wealthier than others, and that there's a responsibility to educate our next generation of citizens. I respect that responsibility, but I think you have to say this is a fair responsibility, beyond this is not, and stop going beyond those means in redistribution and in getting too many hands in the cookie jar, so to speak.
Yeah. I agree.
I love that analogy. And so I'm going to take it into an entirely different way of saying it, but it's saying the same thing.
Okay.
So we have a chiropractic wellness center. My husband's been in practice for 40 years. I would not take the money that we make from that, send it to the state and say, hey, can you pay my bills for me? Can you pay all of my vendors for me? Because no matter what I send in, which of course we do for taxes anyway, but, and that's another topic. But I know that as soon as it goes to somebody else's hand, their hand is in the cookie jar, and the distribution or redistribution of that drastically changes. So, to relate that to the state, is the state not doing enough? I think the state is doing too much when it comes to, education. And again, if we just start putting these kids first and what is best for them, where it's best for them, everything else starts to sort itself out. We just get so tunnel visioned into, the state is this, the state is that, instead of what's best for the child.
And I felt, I saw a lot of criticism on our current state reps. And I was like, I really followed along this year. Like, I watched so many House sessions, and they do a lot of roll call votes. And I'm like, wait a minute, our state reps, the ones that we elected, they actually did a lot to protect the kids of our community. They did a lot to make sure that the kids in our community have choice and can get the education that best suits them. I'm like, I saw a lot of criticism coming at them, and I was like, they did so great.
But you know what I think, Shannon, is that there are people that are criticizing what our state reps do without really understanding what our state reps have done. There's criticism because there's criticism. And, and that's where agree to disagree, that you may not feel because this is what you think is best that this other person has done. But until you really understand the full length of what is actually happening up at that house, and again, I'm not a politician, but I've been following along as well, and it is not what it appears to be in a lot of cases.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about tax and swept tax, I'll switch from education for a minute and go to the income and sales tax. I have heard a lot of rumblings that if the Democrats do take the majority in the House, that one of the things on the agenda is to somehow work in an income and a sales tax. What are your thoughts on that?
Do you want to take this one first? Because I have a mama bear opinion.
I mean, what do you, if you don't agree with it, what do you think what would be a good revenue stream? Because the state of New Hampshire we need money. Every state needs money.
So we are in the top percentage in property tax already. And so one of the things that the state does is they do give a lot of exceptions to businesses moving in for a period of time.
Yeah.
I would stop giving exceptions and just make our state the most marketable. Because when you give exceptions, you're not getting your full income stream, and then you're looking through other places. I don't agree with a state income tax at all, and I don't agree with a state sales tax at all. If we were going to have one or the other, I would say it would have to be a sales tax, because I can almost wrap my mind around a consumption tax, almost. I'm glad they got rid of the dividends investment tax that they got rid of very recently. I forgot what it was actually called, but the answer isn't throw more money at the problem, hire more politicians and hire more staff. That's how we keep getting into these messes.
Yeah.
Every department in the state gets more robust if it starts to fail. In the civilian world, if your business starts to fail, you downsize, you sell, you reorganize, you reallocate resources, and ultimately you just don't succeed if you don't make changes. In the government, if something starts to fail, the answer is throw more money at the problem and take it off the taxpayers' back. I disagree with that. Part of the reason that I did look to retire to New Hampshire and Goffstown is because, as a retired disabled veteran on a fixed income, I knew what my income was going to be.
Yeah.
And without a sales tax, I know what my payout is going to be reasonably. The property tax was a bit of a wild card, and mine's gone up a lot since moving here. But these are things that I can rationalize. And like I said, I think one of the ways is make us marketable for businesses to come to, but stop giving special tax exemptions to large businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because it's like I I'm not getting any kind of special exemption on my property tax. I think, I'll be personal, I think our property taxes when we moved here were around 6,900, and we're like right at 10. And we've only been here for 8 years. That's not very long, and that's quite a huge jump. But then I hear about, businesses or whatever coming in, and it's like, they get a tax break.
Right.
They get this break, and I'm like, I didn't get a break.
Right. And they do that because they want people to come in. So that's not just a state problem. That is a town problem as well.
Yeah.
So, I just recently did a search on my property. We moved to the lake in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And from October of 2019 to the recent tax bill I just got, I have a 46% increase. 46%. Now, that's based on an increased value because we all know that the town just went around and reassessed, the state just went around and reassessed everybody's property. Yay, our property is worth more, but your house is only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it, right? But the property taxes still go with it, so that precludes people from being able to pay the house that we are getting ready to, and we're in the process of it right now, to force people out of our own town, right?
Community.
Out of our own communities. And the problem is that we all bleed the same green.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to taxes, when it comes to groceries, when it comes to gas, our
I don't
cost
care
of
how much
living.
money you make, it hurts no matter
Exactly,
what right now.
it does. And so no matter what side of the fence you're on, we all bleed the same green. So to add a state income tax on top of that is just, you can't pour from an empty cup, and cups are dwindling rapidly. So I'm very much against a state income tax. And I think the way to, fill that cup back up is to curtail spending. It's like there's spending here, spending there, spending here. And when Henry is saying, it's like if you've got a problem, let's just pour more money into research the problem to see if it can be done. Well, that research costs a tremendous amount of money.
And if they pass these taxes, they're not going to reduce the property tax.
Oh, right.
No, they won't.
It's not.
No, they won't.
I can't think of a time when I've ever seen a tax reduction. There was one year where there was a property tax reduction. It was right after I bought my house.
Was that when there was the surplus in the school budget?
And it was
It
higher.
was in 2018. There was a big dip.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I bought my house, the tax on it, now I have a duplex on a couple of acres, but the tax on it was a little over $8,000 a year when I bought it. It's over $12,000 now. What that meant for my that meant for my monthly payment was that my mortgage went from about $1,900 to almost $2,300 a month, and that's all in escrow.
Yeah,
That's
insane.
my property
It's almost like you're
insurance didn't
paying more
change.
to your escrow than you are on your property.
I
at this
actually
point.
am.
Yeah.
I actually am.
Yeah.
And I just think okay, our property taxes have gone up, inflation is high. Like you said, we all bleed the same green. So for my household, it's like, okay, maybe we're shopping at Aldi. Maybe we're shopping at Trader Joe's and we're not at Whole Foods. And we find ways to cut spending. And maybe we're not taking a vacation this summer. But then I look up at the State House and how the governments run, or in town and how the governments run. And I'm like, wait a minute. Where's your curtailing? Where are you saying, hey, let's cut back this, let's see if it, to me, it's like, what's it gonna hurt to say one fiscal year, let's cut back here and see if we can make a difference for people. But that, like you said, they're just money. So another topic that's big for my family, and I know it's important to you, Henry, is the Second Amendment. So I come from a family of hunters. My spouse served in the military, and he he's a Charlton Heston from my Cold Dead Hands kind of guy. So what are your thoughts on some of the restrictions I know that the Democrats have been trying to add, like the red flag laws and all that stuff?
Well, you deferred to me. Would you like to take this one first?
I can, but I'm not going to speak as eloquently as you. But I will
I don't know
go.
about that. You've been a tough act to follow.
Okay, I am for the Second Amendment. I am for protecting our freedoms. I'm for protecting ourselves. Coming from a military family, that is important. I'm not a hunter. I don't like guns myself, but when it comes to protecting myself and my family, you're darn right. I'm going to want to have a means to protect myself. You don't bring a knife to a gunfight, so to speak. And the direction that our country is going in, and I'm not going to say that it's specifically affecting our town right now, but Second Amendment rights absolutely affect everybody in this town. And I think it's very important that we uphold our constitutional rights and be able to protect. So that's not to say that I'm in favor of going out and getting whatever the machine guns are, right? But the bottom line is people are getting guns whether it's legal or not, right?
Well,
You can
gun
go
laws don't
anywhere.
stop. Criminals don't follow gun laws. To begin
Exactly,
with,
exactly.
so-
And the biggest point is that the gun kills people. What's it saying? Guns kill people, people kill people.
Yeah.
With the gun,
The
right?
guns don't kill people. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the person.
Right. It's the
pulling trigger.
person that has it. And if a person wants to get a gun, they're going to get a gun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking guns away puts us into a terrible situation. And, God help the person that doesn't have it when they need it. So, I am for Second Amendment rights.
So I'm going to take this in two places.
I knew you would.
It's okay. The first one is, yes, I believe in the right to bear arms, period. I absolutely do. There's a difference between response and reaction. And so when you call 911 because the house is on fire, they're going to respond. But the immediate reaction is grab a fire extinguisher, evacuate your family, turn on water, whatever you can do to put that out.
Yeah.
And when you decide that you can't, like I'd be calling 911 even while I'm reacting, but when you decide you can't, you call emergency response. And they come and they do their best to resolve the situation. But they're showing up in minutes,
Yeah.
maybe, if they're not on another call. Reaction is what protects people. So if somebody has a heart attack here right now, somebody should call 911. Somebody should maybe start doing emergency first aid.
Right.
Your firearm is your emergency reaction if you are a responsible gun owner.
Yeah.
When 911 is on their way and somebody has violence in mind and has broken into your house or pulled you out of your car, it's the NRA likes to say when seconds count, help is minutes away, and there's a truth to that. Now, with regards to the red flag laws, the red flag laws are a very, very slippery slope because anybody who's not familiar with red flag laws is if somebody is deemed by anybody to be a threat to themselves or others, then the government can disarm them.
Yeah.
So that can be abused very quickly. It can be abused not only by false accusations because there is no due process of law. There is the theory. There is no due process of law. So now you're taking the liberties of people without guaranteed due process, and the people have to fight the government with their own money to get their firearms back when the government feels like releasing them. But the other thing is, who are these geared toward? Well, they're geared to somebody who is in theory a risk to themselves or others. So how many? Rhetorical question. How many people do you know that are veterans, and are they going to portray all veterans as having PTSD? How many people do you know who have ever been prescribed a psychotropic medication, ADHD, bipolar disorder?
I was going to say, I can't buy a gun. I'm bipolar. I can't even buy a gun.
Okay, but I didn't know that, and that's not necessarily my business.
Yeah.
But if you give anybody the right to start looking at records, which I know, and I don't mean criminal records, I mean medical records.
Yeah.
And I know HIPAA is a thing, but I also know that there are some government gateways that insurances have access to. If you give the idea of investigating somebody's behavioral health history all the way through childhood, are we really at the level where we're going to start denying constitutional rights because somebody had ADHD when they were a 12-year-old boy and broke things? I think that the potential for that to happen is there. So, people say, catastrophic slippery slope theory, but it's not that far off when you say, I think that this person could conceivably be a risk. Anybody could conceivably be a risk. Do you have the means to protect yourself if somebody is?
That's an interesting way to look at it. It is a slippery slope when government gets involved.
In everything.
Everything.
Oh, that 1% income tax will be, 8% in 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one, I think, because to a point, it's like I think there needs to be a vehicle for, like the shooting that happened in Maine. Very clearly, like, people missed the mark here. Like, very clearly there were signs. Very clearly this person, whether it was a period of time, should not have had access to guns. This person needed some serious mental health care. I feel like there should at least be a vehicle there for those extreme situations when it's like very clearly this person, we don't know what's going to happen here. And multiple people, I mean, the government was even saying that.
Right.
Yet he still had access to firearms. So I feel like it doesn't bother me that I can't buy a gun. I mean, I'm like, I've been level for 15 years. Why can't I own a gun? But it is what it is. But I feel like there needs to be a vehicle, but I also agree with you that that vehicle very quickly can, be off a ravine like that. And law-abiding gun owners, good people who are really following the law, all it takes is someone to be upset with you and to say, Henry, that guy Henry, he gave me a dirty look. I heard him talking about, taxes and the government, and he's a radical. And that's all it's going to take. And I don't think people realize that sometimes.
Well, but where does that line get drawn?
Yeah.
Because there is a line. What happens to the police officers who retire?
By
right?
whom
And
does
now
that
they're a
line
citizen.
get drawn?
Yeah.
Is the
Exactly.
scarier question.
Exactly.
By whom?
Exactly.
Who's drawing it?
Who's
Right.
drawing it, and when can it get moved when you have two political parties that like to yank as hard as they can in other directions when they have a majority?
Right.
That's
Right.
tough.
So, slippery slope, don't, crossing that line.
Well, a slippery slope, another topic I feel that we have gone down is the gender affirming care for children route. And I know this is a really hot button issue. I think I can speak for all three of us from what I know. We all know people who are members of the LGBTQ community. From what I've witnessed with you guys, you were just you do you, I'm going to do me. You're all very open. I do know that there were a couple of bills that came through the House, though, this past session. One of them had a really large response on both sides, and it had to do with surgery and certain procedures for the gender affirming care model. And I know there were people who were really upset about it. I know there were people who were very passionate about it, but I was wondering what your thoughts were on this bill that went through about gender affirming care for minors.
So I believe that children are children for reasons, and that their adult caretakers, their parents, ideally, are ultimately responsible for them. There's a reason that children are not allowed to buy alcohol, tobacco. There's a reason that children are not allowed to buy medications that are controlled. There's a reason that children aren't allowed to get tattoos or piercings without parental consent. So to me, if you have not reached the age of majority, if you are not a voting age person, I don't think that is solely your decision to make. I also don't believe that it's safe or fair to make that decision for somebody who hasn't gone through all of puberty. I mean, might be a slight overshare, but I was probably about 7 years old in one of those military bases. The entire courtyard was little girls, and I told one of my relatives that I wanted a doll for Christmas, and that relative looked at me and said, "Little girls play with dolls, not little boys." This is a
That's back in the
generation
day,
ago,
yeah.
okay? And I looked up straight faced and I said, "Well, then I want to be a little girl." I never wanted to be a woman. I wanted to be accepted by my peers, and at 5, 6, 7 years old, my peer group was a bunch of little girls. I'm scared that if I would have said that at 5 years old right now, that somebody would have offered to commit surgery on me, and I wouldn't have understood, and I'd have been like, "Let's go."
Right.
Now I grew in through puberty, discovered that I like women, and that I was proud to be a man, and I grew into who I am. I think that everybody should have the opportunity to go through all those phases and discover
to really
who they
figure
are.
out who they are.
And if you're a consenting adult and you choose to live your life however you want, as long as you don't create an outside victim or infringe on anybody else's rights, bless you, have fun. It doesn't bother me at all how adults want to live their lives. I don't want us to be molding or certainly committing surgery on children before they've had a chance to discover who they are.
I think that for me, I was a total tomboy. When I was little, I was climbing trees. I lived across the street from people who had bulls, so I would go out and help them train their oxen. I was a dirty little kid. I just loved to. And I think back and I look at how we are now, and I'm going, man, somebody would have told me, well, that's because you're a boy. But let me tell you, as an adult, I love being a woman. I love my femininity. I'm so glad I had a chance to be a tomboy, and I'm so glad I have a chance to be who I've turned into. And I couldn't agree with you more. Adults, do you? I really don't care. What you do in your bedroom, what you do in your life, that's totally up to you. Are you a good person? Are you a person of good character? I think that's what matters more than are they wearing a dress or are they wearing slacks? But
Yeah,
what are your
you know,
thoughts?
and I agree. Having 5 kids, 16 grandkids, again, you know, I mean, I look at my little people when I hear the arguments for both sides. I look at my little people, and how would I feel if all of a sudden one day they came and said, "Grandma, I'm a boy." And you're not a boy, you're a little girl, but I want to be a boy. Okay. That's not really your decision to make, you know, and do you want to be a tomboy? Be a tomboy.
Yeah.
And I think that where society is taking us right now is, again, a slippery slope, because we've got hormones going on in these children that are natural hormones that are now being changed with synthetic hormones that is causing irreparable damage to these kids.
There's been studies that have come out recently.
I know, and I mean, there's a lot of studies, and you know, that's where it's like, again, tunnel vision, and you know, you want to see one thing, so that's all you see, and anything on the outside has got to be a dark area. But the fact is that we need to start looking at these studies that are happening to these children who have been transitioned, who are, you know, are sad because of those decisions. And once this happens, there is no going back.
No.
You know, and you've got,
It's irreparable.
well, you've got doctors that are out there saying that, oh, you know what, if you decide you want to change back, you can. You can't.
No.
You can't. And I'm with Henry. I don't think that children should be making those decisions. I wanted to be, you know, 10 things when I was a little girl, and I was able to play. You know, kids are curious. And, you know, I mean, if somebody is truly going through an identity crisis where they feel like they are, you know, one sex over another, as an adult, again, same thing, you do you. And, you know, some of my great friends are, you know, I have a few that have transitioned, and I have some that are LGBTQ. So, I mean, I don't care about that. But what I do care is about the children. And so I am against, unless you are of age, consenting age to make a decision, because you don't know that you shouldn't be.
And I feel like whatever happened, I always felt growing up, it was like, okay, well, I was a tomboy. Like I was kind of more of a masculine girl when I was little. What was so wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with boys who are feminine? I don't think there should be anything wrong with that.
Right.
And it almost feels like to me, wait, I thought we were supposed to be telling kids they could be whoever they wanted to be. So what's wrong with a boy that just wants to play with dolls?
Right. See, I think there's a caveat to this whole thing also that needs to be discussed, that if in fact there is a medical reason, a true medical reason for a transition of a child, that's entirely different than I choose this.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. Yeah, 100%.
I also think to a certain extent, follow the money trail.
That's a big can of worms on that one.
I believe that your medical industry is deliberately making lifelong consumers, because once you start hormone therapy,
You can't stop.
Can't stop.
Once you've altered that, whether you decide you're going to discontinue altering it or reverse it or continue, for the rest of your life, you're going to have to level out your hormones in some direction.
Once you're medicalized.
And it can't be done naturally once you start to mess with that. Or it'll be very hard to transition off of it anyway.
Yeah, and there's huge empathy for anybody that feels that way.
Oh my, I can't imagine having...
Whether it's a child, whether it's a parent of the child, huge empathy, and trying to navigate within your own family is difficult.
And I don't feel though like the medical community is trying to help these people navigate. No. I feel like they're walking in the door saying, medicalized, here you go. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's so many other things that these families need. Like if a child is truly dealing with gender dysphoria, there's so much that can be done for that child to help them feel comfortable with who they are until they're ready and old enough to make that decision. There's so many, but we're not even, some of the studies like the WPATH files and the CAS files, it's like, we have just like, these doctors know exactly what they're doing. They 100% know that they're just medicalizing these people for the rest of their life. And it's like, people have, we want to trust doctors. We want to trust those people. And sadly, I feel like we've maybe followed a little too blindly down that path. But on the same topic, I know there is a bill sitting on the governor's desk right now about men in women's sports, biological sex in sports. What say you on men in women's sports, like someone who's transitioning to be a female? playing in women's sports?
No. In a word, biologically, men are built different. Men have different abilities. Men have different capabilities. Men are stronger than women. And, so what you're doing in allowing men to compete against women is you are devaluing and invalidating what a woman is, right? And so even if somebody identifies as a woman and says that they want, biologically, they are still different.
Yeah.
And it is unfair. It is unfair
Yeah.
for men in women's sports.
I've struggled because I feel like Democrats or the left or a lot of people, especially through COVID, it was like, follow the science, follow the science, follow the science. But when it came to this topic, all of a sudden science went out the window and
Right.
it was about feelings.
Right.
And I'm like, but wait a minute, if you want to wear women's clothes and you want to transition to be a woman, that's totally fine. I got you. I will call you, I will respect your pronouns, but you're denying biology. Just because you're taking hormones, just because you're taking puberty blockers, it does not change your biology.
Correct.
So I feel like we're denying that.
Right. But that goes into the same category of, allowing those same biological male who identify as a female into women's locker room. You allow them into the sports, you have to allow them into the locker rooms, you have to allow them into the restrooms.
That's the slippery
And
slope.
I do not want my 16 little people going into a restroom where there's a biological male. I think that in situations where that person identifies that way, they can use a restroom that is, or a locker room that is.
I don't think they should be made to
specifically-
feel uncomfortable either. Do you know
Absolutely,
what I mean?
absolutely. But
there's a solution.
The solution to that is that you have your own, own restroom or own locker room, if that's the way you're going to do it. But you shouldn't be allowed to play in women's sports.
My other concern is safety. Men have more dense bone structure on average, et cetera. And, certainly not all sports are contact, all right? Like swimming, which we just had the big thing, the NCAA, that's non-contact. There was no risk to the swimmers. But in that circumstance, you are taking scholarships away from women. You
Taking
are
opportunities away.
taking
Right.
opportunities. And, there may be scholarships available for people who are transgender persons. I don't know. But I don't think that anybody should be competing for a men's specific scholarship or a woman's specific scholarship unless they are competing on an equal playing field. Now, with that said, I also understand that in some non-contact sports, for instance, I play disc golf as a hobby, and they just changed the men's division to the mixed division. So a woman can choose to compete in the men's division. Again, this is a non-contact sport.
But it's a choice.
A woman
but
can
that's a
choose.
choice.
A woman can
Right.
choose to compete in the mixed division,
Right.
but a man cannot choose to compete in the females division. So I have no problem with allowing women to compete with men and allowing men to compete with women. I do not want to end the safe and competitive means for women to compete among women for scholarships, for money, for without the disadvantage of possibly safety from somebody who's transitioned, not because they mean any harm, but because they're built differently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if you can believe it or not, 50 minutes went right by. So before I sign off with my viewers, could you guys maybe tell our viewers how they can find you on social media to learn more about you?
Oh gosh, well, I have a Facebook page.
Okay.
And so it's Sherri Reinfort for NH. SherriReinfort.4NH. So you can find me there. I have SherriReinfort.com, which will be my website.
Fun.
Yep. And, welcome any questions, follow along. It'd be great.
How
Yeah.
about you, Henry?
I have a Facebook page at Henry Gaisson III for Goffstown.
Awesome.
And other than that, just look for the guy on a motorcycle. I spent half my life on a motorcycle and the other half wearing a cowboy hat. I'm pretty easy to find.
These are two candidates for state rep, Sherri Reinfort, Harry Gaisson III. Get out on September 10th to vote in our primary, and we'll see you next time.